Now this,
Yeah, I can't get a screen.
this is the stick of truth. Whoever gets to hold this stick
Hey,
is
you're
the one
Houston.
talking. Okay? Everyone got it?
Hey.
Wait, I don't have the stick. I can't speak.
I've ordered my court buff. Okay. First, we are going to go to buff. Mythic, you shall wait your turn. Oh. Your case.
Okay, so we've agreed on the premise of the case is the efficacy of raid farms on the server. Correct?
Correct?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I would like to make my opening case for why it is not ethical. Everyone turn your attention to the Discord live stream that I'm pulling up. Everyone watch this piece of evidence, and once you fully reviewed it, put the video on loop.
What's going on?
The stream closed.
Yeah,
Okay.
just click the YouTube link in the chat.
Alright. I think we all watched the video, so we can move on now.
Oh, tell me,
Poor
Judge,
dogs.
if someone were to have a Minecraft world where dogs were in perpetual pain of dying and possibly even having dogs have to watch their brothers and sisters die repeatedly for an undetermined amount of time for the enjoyment and pleasures of those putting them through the suffering, wouldn't you call the person causing that suffering clinically insane?
Depends. The same can be said for
Uh,
iron golem farms and mob farms.
Objection, Your Honor. If I may add the stick.
Okay. Working stick number 2. Return your stick buff.
Okay, so he said a second ago that if you're killing Minecraft dogs and you're enjoying it, does that make you insane? No, I would say not, because we can all agree that the video game world is not the real world. The Minecraft dogs aren't real dogs. They're just AI, inanimate objects. They don't exist. They don't feel pain. People like to play. Let's give an example. People like to play Grand Theft Auto and go on like a crime spree and kill people and such because it's a video game. But they wouldn't do that in real life. It doesn't make them insane because they enjoy doing it in a video game because it's not real. If it was real, then that would be insane. But it's not. It's not the same. That video of the guy that made the dogs dying, that guy that made it, I doubt he'd want to actually kill a real dog. I doubt he'd act that's his intention. He just wants to kill a Minecraft dog because that's not a real dog that can feel real pain. That's what I have to say.
I would like to have the talking stick, Your Honor. I'm not saying that killing an inanimate object of a dog in a video game makes you the same as killing a dog in real life. I'm just saying if you find enjoyment, pleasure for a reason to put an inanimate depiction of a dog, we all know that in the story or anything like that, characters are not real, yet they have a real impact on us, Like, I would like to quote the Bee Movie. Whenever Jerry Seinfeld stops the plane with all of his bee comrades from crashing, we all cheer whenever he saves the bee race from impending doom from, everyone dying. I would say that if you were to want for those characters to go through immense suffering and pain, that would make you psychotic. And I would like to put Peyton on the stand for a witness testimony, actually. Because I believe I've had him over at my house several times where he would kill civilians and just cause free for pleasure. I would like for him to, speak about this scene,
You're
I'll
actually
allow it.
lying in that. It's just cause 4, not 3. I'd like you to read first your factual information before you state it in a court of law, but we're gonna move past that. And it's true that it is fun to play Just Cause 4 and screw around with civilians, but you know why? It's because they're not real. They don't have an impact on anything. It's just fun to mess around. Like, it's all in the name of the game, which is to have fun because it has no impact on anything you do. Like, it won't. If you kill a Minecraft dog, a real dog's not gonna die in the world. It just won't. It just comes back to this thing that they're not real, and even though they are depictions of the animal, it's hard to explain, but That's what I'm trying to say.
Your Honor, we have concluded that he has become desensitized to violence, considering how he can look at realistic depictions of humans in just cause and ruin their lives, families, jobs, everything for just a couple seconds of enjoyment. You know, strapping them to cars, splitting them in half, doing who knows what to these poor civilians. And when we talk about a raid farm, let's think about what's associated with this. We're putting two races of human beings in a video game through immense trauma, pain, and suffering. We have villagers that has to watch as people die screaming in horror as they fall down tubes into a burning pit of death and destruction, as their families have to sit there, suffer, and watch with them, suffering who knows how much psychological trauma. They may even become as desensitized as my prosecutor over here, you know. They will go for an extreme pain and suffering, and not to mention the race of pillagers, which we do not know if they're sentient or not, having to die repeatedly for an undetermined amount of time. For what purpose necessarily? This is not something where you sit there and watch it. This happens in the background. Infinite suffering for who knows how long. For the gains of what? A little bit of XP maybe? A virtual object? And if Peyton thinks that virtual objects have no value, why does he want to put two races of virtual creatures through an undetermined amount of time of suffering for things that equate to essentially nothing?
What you were saying earlier about them, how we don't know that they're sentient or not, also don't, like, that could be very easily contradicted by we don't know. Because, what just happened?
Being in the courthouse because everyone
Anyway.
here's desensitized to violence.
It's not, it really isn't, Jake, because being desensitized to violence, that really is an over-exaggeration, because, again, I said in my opening, the real world and video game world are completely different world, like, realities. I remember I told you, I know, on one hand, I love messing around in Just Cause 4, but, I once accidentally found a Reddit page for gore, and I didn't want to go to that at all. That was disgusting. Like, that's absolutely inhumane. And that just proves my point that video games don't always have an effect on you in the real world, especially if it's violence. Like, it's kind of like how people always say, like, you know, video games cause violence. But it really, that's not the case. It really is not. Video games, like, almost never, ever cause violence because it's just nothing about the reality of the video game world connects to the reality of the real world. The only thing that connects to is the fact that it looks like the real world, but it's not. Nothing about it is real.
May I respond, Your Honor? So you would like to say that there's no correlation between the real world and the video game world, but I would like to assume that inspiration for these video games have to come from somewhere. It's not some arbitrary transcendent realm where we get these ideas planted in our head. Many philosophers have said that humans cannot create any ideas of their own whatsoever. They can only combine existing components in our physical world to create so-called new ideas, but these new ideas are just combinations. So these creatures and things you've desensitized in the video game realm are just an image, a flawed image of reality in a sense, which I think is extraordinarily disrespectful and also simply concerning, the fact that you would be willing to put an entire generation of depictions of human beings through an absurd amount of pain just that way you can get a representation of physical objects. If video game characters are a representation of humans and the infinite value of humans, you're willing to kill a representation of humans in a video game for a representation of an object, just equating to the idea that objects are more valuable than human beings, which I find to be simply grotesque.
Well, it comes back to the idea that you say they look like a depiction of a human. Well, it's a very vague depiction of a human. Like, it's just like a block. It's not like a hyper realistic human that like talks and moves around and everything. It's like a blocky rectangle thing with a face. I don't know, like, it has like very vague human similarities, but at the end of the day, it's not a human. It's not. It depicts a human. That doesn't make it a human. I could like, I could, I could use a texture pack to make something look like it's something different. That's what texture packs are. But at the end of the day, that's not what it is. It's just a depiction of something, but it's not. It's not the same thing. it depicts it, that doesn't make it the thing.
That last response, then verdict will be announced.
Be a second to prepare my final thoughts, Judge. Going to assume I forgot partially what you said, but you're saying that they're unrealistic representations of human beings. I find that to be very concerning because things cannot look like human beings. Like, let's say we were to put a ski mask onto a human and say that's a depiction of a human or anything along those lines. Does that make it okay to kill it just because it doesn't look like a human anymore, just because of its physical depictions? It's a matter of what it represents. These things are representative of human beings, forms of human people, and if it's okay to torture these representations of human beings, I think that's fairly absurd. And also, another thing is we haven't even established the idea that these creatures in video games are not sentient whatsoever. We have no proof that they are not sentient whatsoever. Now, to be fair, we do not have any proof that they are sentient either. But I would like to make an argument for the stand to show compassion to these creatures, whatever they may be. Let's say, hypothetically speaking, they are not sentient. Well, then you can torture them, commit atrocities, put their families through years upon years of imaginary suffering for no real gain whatsoever. But let's assume that they are sentient and you were to put them through this. You would have put in two races of people for extraordinary amounts of pain, psychological trauma, suffering, the whole 9 yards for still a gain that's not really worth anything whatsoever. I would say the trade-off is great. If we are to make an assumption and say what is, the worst possible outcome, then we should take the safe bet and just assume that they're sentient to keep them, alive and safe, just in case they are sentient. I'm not making the case that they are or not sentient. I'm just saying hypothetically, we have a 50-50 chance here, one or the other. I would say we'd take the safe bet and not traumatize an entire race of potential human beings for no real apparent reason.
Well, two things. One, you've always mentioned, like, oh, torturing them and their families. That's not how Minecraft villagers work. Minecraft villagers don't have backstories. They don't have, like, a life. They just spawn into the game upon rendering them. They don't have a family, which sounds really which sounds really inhumane, but that's just the way it is. The only way they would is if you make it up. They don't have, like, an actual in-game family. It's not how it works. And also, what you were saying about them being sentient, and you're hypothetically thinking that they're sentient. Well, if they were, I feel like they would, if if they didn't approve of it, I feel like they would try to stop you from them using you. I mean, if they were sentient, I feel like they would try to stop you from using them as, like, basically a machine that generates infinite resources. If they were sentient, then why aren't they stopping us from doing it? There's no reason why they wouldn't stop us. What if someone wanted to just use you for something infinitely? And, well, I mean, it's a bit more complicated in real life, but in the game, because they don't, we don't know that they are sentient. If they are, hypothetically, we just think they're mindless AI. But if they are sentient, why wouldn't they say something to surprise us and us learn that they actually are sentient? I just feel like it'd be weird if they kept it quiet unless they don't mind us using them for farms, unless they aren't being tortured, unless we're all just overthinking all of this.
Okay, the closing arguments have been heard. I have made a verdict. He will make a raid farm, but in respect of Buff/Jake's argument, the ruling is after each raid, you kill off the original inhabitants, leave the children. The children cannot see the murders. That way, we stop traumatizing an entire race, but we will also get the many bounties of having the raid farm and many undying totems, which will save our lives inevitably. The judge has spoken.
Your Honor, that's absurd. That's cruel. Misjudged. I think Ben should be toppled. His regime has gone on too long. This is just the same agreement as per usual, except some children will not be traumatized. Let's think about this. The children won't be traumatized by watching people die, but they
Yeah,
will
they won't be traumatized because they're AI.
will
They
be
don't have
traumatized.
memory.
Be
They
traumatized
don't work like that.
Dying a day later. You don't have any proof.
Whoa.
You don't have any
Whoa.
proof. Your Honor, look, he's pulling out weapons. Your Honor.
Honor has
He
left the
attacked
house.
me.
I don't get paid enough to stay there 24/7.
Well, court closed.
Well,
Good court.
screw you. We
Sorry.
all know that court's corrupt anyways.